I'd like to move on. I would like to introduce our next guest who will speak on real-world challenges and solutions for professional interpreters. She's a multilingual interpreter and translator with over 2 decades of experience across court, tribunal, immigration, and police interpreting assignments. Welcome, Dr. Andrea Denby. Hello, Andrea. You just need to put your microphone on. You need to unmute yourself. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's great.
Good morning, everybody. Hello. Thank you for inviting me. I'm very pleased to take part. I hardly ever do public speaking, first because I'm very shy. Secondly, I work in a small area, which is Hungarian. And when I teach or help or assist people, I like to help them with linguistic technicalities because I've got rather a lot of experience and learning in both languages. And I'm always a little bit wary of talking about generalities that most of us know and which are sort of blanket issues. However, I've got a few things together which still make me think when I interpret after all these years of experience. First of all, these mostly practical matters I'm going to focus on. First of all, the importance of introduction. There are agencies that expect feedback from the clients, and one of them, for example, expects the client to tick whether you've introduced yourself or not. Ever since I came across this, I've been focusing on introducing myself, introducing the Hungarian speaker, limited English speaker, if I'm in that environment. It is great help. It sets up a report. So most of the time, 99% of the time, we will not be in hell. Because just that kind introduction, I'm talking about primarily health setting, social setting, will create a sort of rapport which will allow people to communicate on nice human terms. So that's one thing I would like to bring to attention. Immigration settings, because these are the two things I've been asked to focus on, immigration and health, different matter. Immigration, we have to be formal. I don't know how many interpreters we have here who work in immigration settings. A lot of them will know that judges are very, very sensitive about comments, small talk, chats. So if one is there for the tribunal, one is there for the tribunal. One cannot be friendly, one cannot make small talks, one doesn't initiate introduction, but always someone else will. No comment, no chatting, because the issue is so sensitive that one cannot take sides in any way, even implicitly. So I'm not going to talk more about that. It's good to pay attention to that because some of the judges are very sensitive about that and they will warn. Now, I would rather stay at a social setting, health setting at the moment. We've got 2 ways at the moment, mostly, or 3: phone, remote, and face-to-face. So face-to-face, nice to create this report. I've heard that hint from Samina that we've got that sort of interpreting that only interprets, I'm here to interpret. I ask you where you come from. Sorry, my code of conduct forbids me to answer because I'm here to interpret. So I'm going to interpret what you say. Now, most of us who work in a health environment will know that the health staff usually are very friendly. They like to create a nice rapport with people, so they are not intimidated. They are not worried about what's going to happen next, especially when they have very serious conditions. So I feel over the years now, I've been working in health, and it's really nice to be friendly, not over friendly, not to talk, not to ask questions about people, where you come from or how many children you have. They may not be able to have children or, whatever, but, talk about the weather. If they try and be friendly about car parking, it took me half an hour to park the car because the upper deck is closed and, there was mayhem in the car park, but we were all very good and we sorted out the mayhem and I managed to get here on time. And if they want to talk to you, then talk to them. Don't suppose anything. Don't suppose from their name that they come from here or there or anything about their families, but try and create a nice conversational basis in the waiting room because we usually spend time waiting. And it's nice to, I feel, nice to create a sort of nice rapport, a pleasant environment, human environment in which we can work. Now, when it comes to remote, we often come across the problem of very bad lines. You know, a line is crackling, I can hardly hear. If it's not a matter of life and death phone call, I will hang up. I will ask them, you know, it's impossible to work under these conditions. I can't be sure as to what I'm interpret, and matters are serious. So please try and phone again. Please try and sort out the line. When it's a matter of life and death, some of you may have not thought about this, beginners. Try and hold the line. So what I'm trying to do, I can roughly hear what someone says. I reiterate. I tell the client, sorry, I can hardly hear what the limited English speaker says, but if you can bear with me, I repeat it back to them in their own language and check whether that is what they have said. And I will work like that as long as we get to a stage that sort of the situation can be dealt with. So when it's a matter of an emergency call, I feel personally the last resort is to hang up. So you don't hang up. As long as you can manage the conversation with a fair amount of safety, so you are not going to gather something else than what they've said from the conversation, hold the line. Next step, let's say we established a nice communicational setting and off we go, we can interpret, which is the ideal world. The line is clear, everyone's clear, you can understand what people say. I still come across situations from old colleagues and from people who sort of step in to interpret whatever we think about that. Sometimes they do, sometimes there isn't an interpreter and they always interpret for mom. And they keep explaining the situation. Please don't. Sometimes there's a cultural gap. So people will not understand the term I'm using because it condenses rather a lot. Then I will paraphrase that term so it's clear what I'm saying, but I will not keep explaining the situation because whether there's a doctor or whether there's a person conducting the interview, they will want to see that person. They know what they are looking for. They want to form their own picture. Next thing, I still have a problem after 20 plus years of interpreting that I'm interpreting and suddenly I can't believe what I hear because it's completely out of context. It just doesn't fit in with anything what they said. Please interpret because very rarely one catches out oneself. So I do something like a little cosmetic surgery. I sort of bend the interpretation in a way that it fits in with everything else. And after 2 rounds, I get caught out by myself. And it dawns on me that what I heard was incredible, but correct. And then I can get my razor out. Either during the interview or after the interview, I've got to approach the police officer and I have to say, sorry, sir, I could hardly believe that, but that's what they said. He didn't say that, but that's what they said. Actually happened to me. Since then, it hasn't happened to me. It happens to me about once a year. So be careful. If you really can't believe your ears, then confirm. Obviously, there's this problem. There's a flow of communication, which we don't want to interrupt. We want it to be natural. And there's the other problem of safeguarding, that what we interpret has to be right. So if there's a serious doubt, very serious doubt of what I hear, then I will stop the flow of communication and I will say that interpreter will need to clarify what's been said, because I'm not going to say I can hardly believe my ears, but interpreter is not quite clear about it. And then we can go on. So this is a problem I still come across. The other thing is when people haven't got the register of what you've got. In medicine in Hungarian, people are very well trained. Hungarian medical professionals are very well trained. They learn a lot of the anatomy in Latin. So you come across, I read a lot. Many terms I've never heard in spoken Hungarian, what people use. I've learned a lot from people over the years, so very many terms I know now. However, people will often not be able to talk about their own health. So they will say things which doesn't exist. For example, pinched spine. We know there cannot be a pinched spine. Or they will say that they've got a cold from down below. We know there's no such thing because it's got to be an infection. So in these cases, in a health setting, I will have to stop the flow of communication, and I will point out to the doctors that people say these things, and these things are not medical terms, but this is how they say things. So this must be a pinched nerve in the vertebra or somewhere in the spine. So I will stop the flow of communication then. And then I'm going to have another problem apart from safeguarding, and that I want a proper flow of communication, and that is allowing people's character to come through. So doctors especially like to see the person they are dealing with. So I will not mock people or mimic people, because I wouldn't mock them anyway, but I wouldn't want my mimicking to be mocking. So I'm not going to mock or mimic their style. I'm going to be sort of formal. But in a health setting or social setting, I will very, very gently hint at their level of language use. So if it's very incoherent, I will at some point very modestly, quietly point out that I'm using my razor to make those sentences coherent. I never want to criticize people, but I will ask them very politely and nicely to try and be clear to me as much as possible so I can do the best interpretation for them. This is where I feel you always balance, and still to the present day, I watch my tone, I watch my tongue, so I don't possibly hurt or offend anyone, but I give a very good overall picture of what's going on. One more thing, because I know we are limited by time, and that's when I know a patient's history. When I know a patient's history and that patient is a very bad communicator and got lots of ailments, I'm going to stop. I'm going to tell the doctor that I know the history as an interpreter, and I will ask the doctor to allow me to ask the patient to give me permission to tell the doctor all the history. And then I'm going to summarize the history, and I will tell the patient I've summarized the history. And I feel that's a very good solution, rather than wasting time and multiplying confusion or not letting the doctor know about a very important things that are important for that person's care. So these are the main things that still sort of try me in spite of years of experience. And this is what I wanted to share. And there's one more thing, that we are not supposed to share our details or not supposed to personally help people as interpreters, because we work for the client. We are booked in formal settings, especially with the NHS. It's a very difficult one. I warn young interpreters. I've got into trouble very many times by being over helpful. It cannot be done, no matter that my heart is bleeding. What I can do, I can hold my little badge. You know, they can find me. They can find me through the register. They need help. So don't. It's a very, very difficult thing. And sometimes I feel terrible. You know, I walk away from all that trouble, but don't.
Yeah. Andrea, that was really enlightening, and it just really showcased the need for clarity in communication. It's absolutely critical to avoid misunderstandings and the incorrect information being communicated. So yeah, thank you so much. And yeah, thank you, Dr. Denby. Admired for the work that you do. Really appreciate it.